Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. This time I'm going to be going through the Senate projection that I have for 2020, and I'm going to be going through 9 states here. There's a total of, I don't even know what, like 40, 35 up for election this year, 35 Senate seats up for grabs, it looks like. But there's only about 9 of them, in my opinion, that are really coming down to, that I want to talk about today, rather. And I'm going to go ahead and start off and just say that because of what I posted in my last video with Joe Biden winning, I'll go ahead and put him as the VP, whoever would be his vice president. And I'm going to go ahead and just start off real quick and just mention the state of Georgia really fast before I kind of get into the states I actually want to discuss. Georgia does have 2 Senate elections this year, and I would love to talk about them. I'd love to predict them. I'd love to discuss them, but I don't really know much about them. This main election, we will be having David Perdue will be the incumbent and will be going against some Democratic challenger. We still don't know who yet exactly. And then the special election is, of course, another Republican seat that was won in 2016 that is now once again up for grabs. So 2 Senate races in Georgia that we don't know much about that could possibly aid in the Democrats flipping the Senate. Now, before we get into this video, let's talk about what the Democrats need to do to flip the Senate. Their goal is these 4 states: Arizona, Colorado, North Carolina, and Maine. All right. They're predicting that they might lose the state of Alabama. I'll go ahead and talk about that in a little bit with Doug Jones out there. But keep an eye on these 4 states as the Democrats attempt to either get a 50-50 split or completely flip the Senate in its entirety. So out in Montana, we've got a really interesting race. It'll be Steve Daines is the incumbent, and he'll be going against Bullock, who was, of course, a Democratic presidential candidate last year, and of course gained a lot of traction from that. Polls are showing in Montana that 70% of likely voters agree with Bullock's handling of the pandemic, while only 48% approve of Daines and what he has been doing. So this could be one of those states that could end up being up for grabs, a state that the Democrats could expand with picking up. But when push comes to shove, I see the Republicans picking up the state of Montana. I'm going to go ahead and move down to Kansas because I'm sure no one was really expecting me to talk about Kansas, so I'll go ahead and talk about it now. The reason I want to discuss it is because the last Democrat to win statewide Senate seat in the state of Kansas was in 1930. That was 90 years ago. And now there is a Democrat running. We're not sure who the Republican is yet running for this Senate seat. There are a couple different Republicans that they're going between, a conservative and more of a Trump Republican. So they're trying to figure out what lane to occupy. Meanwhile, the Democratic challenger, she comes out and just says, look, I used to be a moderate Republican who has now become a pragmatic Democrat. And that's an exact quote from her. 45% of the state's voters are Republicans, 25% are Democrats, while 30% are unaffiliated or don't vote. And so I would still be interested to see if the Democrats can flip this state, but I do think that Kansas is still a few years away from electing a Democratic senator. So I do see re-election, or excuse me, a win for the Republicans picking up that seat once again in Kansas. Now, out in Arizona, Arizona is going to be one of those 4 really, really interesting battles that the Democrats are keeping an eye on, 4 seats that they're trying to flip. And I'm going to give them this one. This is due to the fact that right now, retired astronaut Mark Kelly is going up against Martha McSally and polling about 10 points ahead of her in the state, as well as Trump has a low approval rating in the state, just under 48%. And so I do believe that retired astronaut Mark Kelly can win this seat over Martha McSally, flip this seat out in Arizona. Now, with the state of Colorado, We have Cory Gardner, who is boasting a 37% approval rating in the Republican Party, looking for reelection in the state, going up against either John Hickenlooper or Andrew Romanoff. We're still not sure who it's going to be, but I think no matter who it is that the Democrats choose, I see this being a seat that they flip rather easily. I think that Colorado is a state that is becoming more and more blue every single year. I don't see this poor approval rating being something that Cory Gardner can rebound from and still come out on top in this race. Now, moving out to the Midwest, we've got Iowa, which is another Republican incumbency that I'm sure not a lot of people thought I would be discussing as we get into, Iowa and Kentucky, obviously. But right now in the polls, it shows a 1% difference between Joni Ernst, the Republican, and the challenger, Theresa Greenfield. Joni Ernst has a 47% approval rating, which is all right. Again, just under half of the likely voters in Iowa. And so I do see this being a state that will stay red as far as the Senate is concerned. I do see Trump obviously still picking up the state, as I did in the last video. But look out for this state, because if Theresa Greenfield can really pick up steam in the state, what would that do for possibly a guy like Joe Biden in the state of Iowa? Could that bring more Democrats out to vote? Could they flip that seat as well? All questions that will need to be answered. So now we're getting into Kentucky, and Kentucky is a surprising one given the fact that it is Mitch McConnell's seat. It is Speaker of the House's seat, but the Democratic primary is not until the middle of June, and we don't know who the Democratic challenger is yet, but we do know that the highest polling Democratic challenger is a woman named Amy McGrath, and she outperformed Mitch McConnell in donation raising and has about the same amount of in-pocket money as Mitch McConnell, and she's challenging him in the state. Mitch McConnell has low approval rating as well. Polls show a very close race within 1 or 2% between them. And so look out for Kentucky to be a state that could be interesting. I do see Mitch McConnell still winning his seat. I would be shocked if Mitch McConnell lost his home seat in Kentucky, but it could happen. So be on the lookout for that. Now working our way down to Alabama, the one state that the Democrats, I believe, will probably not win back out of all that they have in this election cycle. I just don't see Doug Jones getting the W over the Republicans. Again, he won by just under 2% in the last election. His approval rating is up to 41% since January. However, Donald Trump's approval rating in the state continues to be the highest in the country at 59%. And so I do think that this will end up being a Republican won seat. And I think that the Republicans will flip that one seat down in Alabama. Now we get into the two seats that a lot of people are talking about getting a lot of coverage, and we'll go ahead and talk about Maine first. Maine is a state that I believe definitely could be flipped. Obviously, we have the four most important. Two of them we've said are going to flip. Here are the other two Republican seats that they want to flip in order to have this situation. I think Maine is one that it could definitely happen. Susan Collins with a 37% approval rating as of mid-April, and I just don't see Susan Collins being able to rebound from the impeachment inquiry and the problems that she faced once she said that she thought Donald Trump learned his lesson. I don't think voters in Maine believed he has learned his lesson. And so I do see the Democrats in Maine flipping that state. Working our way down to now the highly contested state of North Carolina, my home state, Cal Cunningham versus Thom Tillis, the incumbent Republican. This state polls consistently Democrat by about 1 or 2%. The most recent poll from East Carolina University shows a 1% lead for Thom Tillis. Thom Tillis boasts probably the worst. I know at one point this year, 2020, it was the worst approval rating of any Republican up for re-election in the Senate at just over like 20% or 25%. And so Tom Tillis is in a very, very precarious situation, especially once you consider that Cal Cunningham is a great Democrat to run in a state like North Carolina. He's an Iraq war veteran. He's got a great story, and he's a father. He's a guy who really values education and things like that, which are all things that North Carolinians really care about and things that North Carolinian Democrats and moderates can get on board with. That's the big thing with a state like North Carolina and even Maine, Arizona, states like these are that you have to get the moderate block of voters. And if you can get that moderate block of voters to go one way or the other, that's how you flip that election in the state, because North Carolina doesn't have an overwhelming amount of Republicans, doesn't have an overwhelming amount of Democrats. It has about the same amount, and then it has all these independents and all these people that don't know where they're going to vote. And so I could see this going either way. For my very first prediction video, I think I'm going to go with my gut right here, right now, and say that it's going to Tom Tillis. And that is simply just because of the fact that Tom Tillis right now still has a well-oiled machine. The Republicans are really focused on North Carolina, dumping the most money into North Carolina more than any other state, more than any other Senate race in the country. So I think that if they pick one up, if the Republicans can pick one of them up, it would be North Carolina. And that's what I think will happen. So guys, stay on the lookout for more of these prediction videos, for an updated projection of the 2020 general election. I also think I might do a video where I just go through some polling information with you guys about why I pick certain things for certain this, what kind of information I'm seeing, because a lot of times I get, why do you flip this state and not this state, and I'd love to just have an opportunity to talk about that and show you guys the polls. Also, obviously, be on the lookout for best case scenario for Trump, best case scenario for Joe Biden, and just be on the lookout for more videos. Thanks, guys.